सब भाइयों और बहनों को हमारे तरफ से, परम पूज्य जी की तरफ से, तिब्बतियों जो तिब्बत के अंदर है उन सब के तरफ से सबको प्रणाम। मुझे अभी भी याद है इंद्रेश जी ने 2002 में जब मैं दिल्ली में काम करने आया था तिब्बतीय सांस्कृतिक और नीति शोध केंद्र के डायरेक्टर के द्वारा, तो इंद्रेश जी के साथ हम लोग उस समय दिल्ली का मुख्यमंत्री साहिब सिंह वर्मा जी थे, तो उनके वहाँ रेजिडेंस में जाके हम लोग हिमालय परिवार और भारत तिब्बत सहयोग मंच का शुरुआत उस समय से किया था। और आज इंद्रेश जी यहाँ नहीं आ पाए कि स्वास्थ्य की वजह से, तो रुपेश जी यहाँ आए हुए हैं, तो रुपेश जी को प्रणाम। आपके आज्ञा से मैं इंग्लिश में बात करना चाहूँगा, क्योंकि ये राजनीतिक और ये ऐतिहासिक जो बात करना है वो हिंदी में हमारे समझ थोड़ा कम है, तो आपको भी मिसकम्युनिकेशन ना हो, इसलिए I'll shift to English. The Honorable Vice Chair, Deputy Speaker of the Assam Parliament, Honorable Minister, Rupesh ji, all the local leaders here in Assam. It's an honor and privilege for me to be here. Just yesterday, I was in Dharamsala. Day before yesterday, I was in Dharamsala. We celebrated the 75th anniversary of His Holiness assuming the political and spiritual leadership of Tibet way back in 1950. That is just before we lost our independence. And this Tamang Yatra, I have personally been a part of this Yatra way back about 10 or 12 years ago. We went from here to Bumla. That was also my first visit to Bumla. And from Bumla, I could see the Tibetan village called Sona, or a township called Sona on the other side of the river. And I was born in exile. I've never seen Tibet. I was born in South India, so I can speak little Kannada, I can speak little Tamil, little Hindi, but not completely. So, but I've never seen Tibet. So to fulfill my emotional needs, I traveled from Arunachal Pradesh to Ladakh to Tibet, to see Tibet from the Indian side. And this Tamang Yatra is also one way of expressing your solidarity with the people of Arunachal Pradesh, who is being claimed by China as part of southern China, as China says it, because they not only invaded Tibet, but they also claim parts of those two territories which were once part of Tibet. But I will go into a little bit of history, because when you supported the Tibetan cause, if you don't understand what Tibet is all about, then it's very difficult to support the cause itself. And since you are coming from some 27 different states in India, I thought maybe I'll just give you an overview of the Tibetan history. We have a recorded history of more than 2,200 years. The Tibetan plateau, which is the highest and the biggest plateau in the world, came because of the tectonic shift between the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate, the Gondwanas and the Eurasian plate. Just this morning I was reading a geologist's report that the tectonic shift is still very, very active, because of which so many earthquakes are happening in the region. These are all seismic zones. And according to NASA, they say that Himalayas is still growing by 10 millimeters every year because of the tectonic shift. So the Tibetans, and this tectonic shift started happening 50 million years ago. So before 15 million years ago, Tibet must be having beaches on its border. If you look at the Himalayan mountains, you will see sands and pebbles in the Himalayan mountains, not rocks, not solid hard rocks. So that shows that Tibet at one time had beaches with India on the other side, and because of this tectonic shift, the Tibetan plateau came up. And even today, the Indian plate is going underneath the Tibetan plate, and it's making the Himalayas rise. Just as the African continental plate is also going below the European plate is also growing. Now, the reason why I say that is because Tibet has been growing over the last 50 million years ago, and according to scientists, they say that the human habitation on Tibetan plateau was way back in more than 30,000 years ago. Now, this, of course, depends on what findings you make. If they find something older, then they might say Tibet has been there. Tibetans have been living on the Tibetan plateau for more than 30,000 years. And the first king of Tibet, Nyatitsembo, there are several versions of where this king came from. So there were two versions which says that one came from Bengal, son of a prince, and another says that the Kaurava prince fled into Tibet. So there are two versions. And there's a third version that the first Tibetan came from within Tibet, called a place called Kongpo. But there are different variations, but it points to the fact of our ancestral relationship. So Tibet became a big empire between 7th to 9th century. We even dislodged the Chinese emperor, the Tang emperor at that time. We even invaded the present-day Samarkand in Uzbekistan. That used to be the extent of Tibetan empire at one time, alongside Mongolia and China. Now, during those periods, in 7th century, the Tibetan king sent a minister to invent a Tibetan script. And he must have most probably gone to Kashmir at that time. And based on the Devanagari script of the Gupta period, the Tibetan script came into being. If I pronounce the Tibetan consonants now, you find it very similar like Hindi. We have ka, kha, khanga, cha, cha, chanya, ta, tha, thana, pa, pa, pama, sa, sa, zawa. So, in Hindi you have ka, kha, kha, ga, ma, cha, 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 janya, and you have a lot of vowels. We have only 4 vowels, e, u, e, o. In Hindi you have a, a, e, u, e, u, e, o, so many vowels. So, the similarity of language, and Tibetan today is one among the 15 oldest languages in this world. And the Tibetan Buddhism also came from India. It's based on the Nalanda tradition. From Nagarjuna's time till today. Now we follow the Nalanda tradition of Tibetan Buddhism that is based on logic. So from 8th century to 13th century, before Buddhism almost vanished out of India, we, the Tibetans, invited Shankarakshita from India, Padmasambhava from India in the 7th, 8th century, and they advised us, since we have a language of our own, why don't you translate every teaching of the Buddha into your language? So based on that advice of Shankarakshita, Tibetans transliterated every available Sanskrit and Pali Buddhist text into Tibetan. In 10th, 11th century, some Tibetan masters walked all the way from Tibet into India to study Buddhism under the Buddhist masters of Nalanda and Vikramashila. So we Tibetans are the only one who are repository of one part of ancient Indian wisdom. We had 400 years of disintegration. Even during those times, from 9th to 13th century, even during those times, Bakhtiyar Khilji from Kuch Bihar sent 10,000 army into Tibet, which is not very much recounted in Indian history. And only 100 army came back. The rest were destroyed either by the Tibetans, who were even at the end of the 400 years of disintegration of Tibet, Tibetans were able to protect their own boundary on the southern side. Then we developed our relations with the Mongols. The Mongols and Tibetan relationship was a priest-patron relationship that came into being in the mid-13th century. Even before Mongols invaded China. After Mongols invaded China, then in China it is called the Yuan dynasty from 1271 to 1368. But the Mongols were there even before that. Mongols were there even after that. Our relations, the Tibetan relations with the Mongols goes up to 1720, in 18th century. Then the influence of the Manchus started. Manchus were also Qings, they are not Chinese. There are a lot of academic discourses as to who is the real Chinese inside China. Are the Mongols Chinese, or the Tibetans Chinese, or the Uyghurs Chinese? If the Mongols are Chinese, then the Chinese can claim half of the world, because that is how much the Genghis Khan and his followers went. They were so, almost 300 years of history between Ming China and Tibet, from 1368 to 1644, when China was ruled by the Mings. We didn't have much to do with the Mings at all, except for some religious relations. There was no political relations at all. Then when the Qings came in, they are Manchus, they are not Chinese. If you watch Chinese Kung Fu movies, you will find that the antagonists are all Manchus. The protagonists are all Chinese, because the Manchus invaded China and they ruled China from 1644 to 1911. But 2 years before that, in 1642, the 5th Dalai Lama had already taken over the temporal and spiritual leadership of Tibet. And so, coming down to the late Manchu period, Manchus were more powerful between 1735 to 1765, when they had little influence over Tibet. But other than that, in the 19th century, then China itself went through the Opium War. And they talk about 100 years of humiliation, when they themselves were not free from foreign colonial rule. Then how can they have control over Tibet? Then the beginning of last century, the British India attacked Tibet in 1904. Then Mabu Hang, warlord, started invading Tibet from northeast India, where His Holiness was born, where my father comes from. And then the Manchu warlords started attacking Tibet from the eastern side. So the 13th Dalai Lama had to flee into Mongolia and into China up to 1909. When His Holiness the 13th Dalai Lama came back to Tibet in 1909, then he had to again flee to India for 2 years, because Mabu Fang's, Tower Fang's army were already in Tibet by that time. Then His Holiness returned back after 2 years, staying in Darjeeling area, the 13th Dalai Lama, and then we signed the 1914 Shimla Agreement. So you are going to Tawang tomorrow. You start your Tirth Yatra from here to Tawang tomorrow. And the region, of course, the Tawang monastery was established during the 5th Dalai Lama's time. Our relation with the Assamese is also because Assam used to send rice to Tibet, those days when Tibet was an independent nation. And that tradition is still being followed in the form of an envelope that the Assamese government gives to the Tawang monastery every year, even today. So this is the kind of relationship we have. Our relationship is also through the Brahmaputra. Brahmaputra flows from western Tibet to eastern Tibet. I know many adventurers, discoverers, they try to go to find the source of Brahmaputra on the north of Assam, Arunachal Pradesh. But the source of Brahmaputra is not starting from there, it's starting from western Tibet. So it's one of the longest rivers in Asia. And Tibet, as we call ourselves, we call Tibet the land surrounded by snow mountain ranges, because we have Himalayas in the south, the Kundun in the west, the Karakoram in the west, the Kunlun in the north, and so many mountain ranges in the east of Tibet. And then Westerners started coming into Tibet from late 16th century, and they started calling Tibet the roof of the world because of its altitude. Because the average altitude of Tibet is more than 16,000 feet. It's 16,010 feet to be exact. That is why it is called the roof of the world. Now today, Chinese environmental scientists call Tibet the third pole, because aside from North Pole and South Pole, Tibet has the largest amount of glaciers and permafrost that feeds all these major rivers in Asia. And Asians call Tibet the water tower of Asia, because the two biggest rivers that flows into India into China originates from Tibet. The Yellow River, on which the Chinese civilization cradled. The Yangtze River which flows south, if it is not for these two rivers, China cannot support its 1.4 billion people. Then the Irrawaddy flows into Burma. The Mekong flows into 5 different Southeast Asian countries: Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam. Then Brahmaputra flows through Tibet into Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. And last time when I was in Arunachal Pradesh, I visited Tuting, the place where Brahmaputra enters into India in Arunachal Pradesh, and where we have some Tibetans living there. And due to the generous support of the Honorable Chief Minister of Arunachal Pradesh, we were taken by helicopter over the Brahmaputra. And I found the Brahmaputra to be very muddy. And it was not rainy season. The river was not in spate. But all the tributaries were pristine clear. Then when I reached Tuting, I asked them, since when has the color of Brahmaputra been like this? And they were saying since 2017, 2018, which means the work on the dam that China is planning to build on Brahmaputra has been going on for the last few years. It was not visible through the satellite images. Now they cannot hide it. So they announced it only last year, on 24th of December, they announced that they are going to go through with this project. But this project has been there in the minds of the Chinese leaders since 1960s. 1960s. Only now, technologically, they are able to do it. Now our friends in Arunachal Pradesh, or members of parliament in Arunachal, also said that now this is a water bomb. The reason why he says this is because the countries that I mentioned, from Pakistan to Nepal to India, Bangladesh, the 5 Southeast Asian countries and China, are some of the most densely populated areas in this world. And according to some scientists, they say between 1.8 billion to 2 billion out of 8 billion people in this world have something or other to do with rivers that originate from Tibet. And we are talking about serious water and food security issues in future. There are some say that Third World War could happen because of water. If that is the case, then Tibet is a huge bio hotspot. So this 1914 agreement that delineates the boundary between Arunachal Pradesh and Tibet, called the McMahon Line, was signed between British India and independent Tibet. China was there, their plenipotentiary was there in 2014 in Shimla, but they finally did not ratify the agreement. It was signed between the British Indian government and independent Tibet. So we abide by what we signed those days, and we believe and we hold this position that Tawang today and Arunachal Pradesh today is part of India. And that is our discretion, our decision, not the Chinese government decision. So after India got its independence, the Indian government also has an obligation to carry forward all the treaties that they signed with other countries. Nepal also became a part of the United Nations by citing their treaty obligations with Tibet. So these historical narratives we need to understand a little bit, because we have our relations with the Mongols, with the Mings, with the Qings, with the Kuomintang, the KMT, and with the Communist Party. So only in 1949, when China was taken over by the Communist Party, that we also get enveloped in the wave of communism that spread in the region, and we have become today a stateless people. We have always remained very, very grateful to the government of India, to the people of India, for their generosity in giving us hospitality and all the humanitarian support because of which we exist today. If it is not for the government of India, we don't exist. I'm always asked this question, how is Indian government treating you? I always tell them, if it is not for the government of India, we don't exist. So we remain thankful to the government of India. We have also some very nice songs thanking India. I always become very emotional whenever the Tibetan Institute of Performing Arts sings these songs to remind our people that India is our host and they have treated us very well. And our historical relationship our spiritual relationship, our linguistic relationship, everything. We are an extension of Indian culture. And I remember one of our leader, Professor Samdong Rinpoche, who is very well versed in Hinduism also, saying in one of the meetings in Chandigarh of all the Tibet supporters, and the Rinpoche cited this example of Hanuman forgetting to fly when Lakshmana was hurt. So Ram had to remind Hanuman that you can fly and fetch the medicines by lifting the mountain. So Rinpoche said, India has all the soft power in this world. Hinduism has spread across Southeast Asia and East Asia. Buddhism, which was born out of Indian soil, out of Indian mind, had spread across many countries. Now, the only thing is India needs to use that soft power and its influence in this world based on the values of ahimsa, nonviolence, and karuna, on which His Holiness built his philosophy and spread the knowledge throughout this world. We are very happy to be carrying forward a legacy of India that is based on ahimsa and karuna. And as we speak, there are so many violent conflicts going around in this world. We don't know whether we are resolving one conflict or whether we are creating more problems in future. But the only way is non-violence means, and that is what we are trying to follow. And His Holiness fights that through the middle way policy. But when you say middle, there are also polarities. So we also focus on the polarities. And the Sangh Parivar has been always very supportive of the Tibet issue. And I had the opportunity of seeking guidance from Sudarshan ji, Mohan Bhagwat ji, and they have always been telling us, even Indiresh ji was telling us that the Sangh supports independence for Tibet. We very much appreciate that, but we also understand the problems that we have to go through by dealing with the Chinese government. So what we are trying to do now is to reach out to governments, at least let every government recognize the fact that Tibet was historically an independent state. So that recognition, if we are given, then it could be a leverage for the middle way, for the Chinese government also to come and talk to us. Otherwise, there's no leverage for middle way. When every country keeps saying Tibet is part of People's Republic of China, because China keeps saying Tibet has been part of China since ancient times. They themselves don't know when ancient times is all about. And they are on very thin ice when it comes to history and their legitimacy or sovereignty over Tibet. We can always fight back. So we are only 40,000 Tibetans in exile today. 70,000 are in India, about 10,000 are in Nepal, and then the rest of 50,000-60,000 are spread across 26 different countries all over the world. And now His Holiness is 90 years old. He is not able to travel as much as he used to do before. So we have to do all the traveling. So I keep traveling 6-7 months a year internationally to reach out to as many governments as possible, to keep our flock, our people together, even though we are becoming physically distant, be emotionally close, and keep the struggle going on. And His Holiness always says, never give up. We will never give up. We'll keep fighting for our right, and we will need your continuous support. Thank you so much.